I thought that for my first video about a horror movie, I would talk about one of my all-time favorite movies and what I like about it, why it scared me, and why I think even to this day it's still very creepy. That movie would be The Ring, which I'm aware is a remake of a Japanese movie called Ringu, which is tied to a book trilogy, Ring, Spiral, and Loop. I will say that initially, when watching the remake, I didn't know that it was a remake of a Japanese movie. This was in 2002, and the internet was just kind of in its starting days, so it wasn't widely available information at the time. As I also mentioned in my previous video, when I tried to find the books, they were really hard to find in an English translation because this was back in the early 2000s, so it was not as easy as ordering them from Amazon today. I mention that because I don't want people to think that I don't have appreciation for the original. In fact, I love both of them pretty much equally. They both have their pros and cons. And I think, as far as adaptations go from Japan, the Ring remake is the best one that we have. If I start getting into my complaints about The Grudge and how they absolutely butchered it compared to the Japanese version, that would be a whole other video and much, much longer. But if you want to hear about that, let me know because I would totally love to do that. In any case, I still remember going to see this movie in theaters, and I remember the very first thing that terrified me in the entire movie. Now, I wasn't young when this came out. I was 17 or 18, I think. And I had seen every horror movie I could get my hands on before that point. Everything that I was allowed to see. And then when I became a certain age, my parents just stopped caring. So I started seeing whatever. I had not seen anything at that point or before that point that had ever really scared me. Had things been creepy or unsettling? Yes. Gross? Yes. But nothing that gave me nightmares, nothing that actively scared me while I was watching it. And this scene hit so hard, I basically had a panic attack because I wasn't expecting it. I also am unsure why it was so effective back then or even now. At this point, it doesn't give me the same sense of fear that it did back then, but it still creeps me out. Like, the echoes of fear are still there. After the movie was released on VHS, because it was still that long ago, I went through the movie and I watched it again and again and again, trying to figure out what was so scary about certain things in this movie. Why was I so scared? Because no horror had ever been effective on me like that before. And if I'm being honest, I have not seen a horror movie since then that has been that effective. I have seen ones that I consider to be very scary, but nothing like that. I was on these forums, I don't think they exist anymore, but they were for Ring fans. And someone pointed out that there's certain scenes where if you go frame by frame, you can see stuff that is totally missed if you don't bother to go frame by frame. And there was a whole forum dedicated just to like hidden Easter eggs within the movie. And this prompted me to sit and study the movie and watch things frame by frame. Doing that, I found some very creepy imagery that I'm not sure many people noticed or even care about, but I do think that it helped to set the unsettling tone of watching the movie. And I think it is something that was put in there to help sell this uneasy feeling without being very obvious about it, without showing it directly to you. I want to share some of those scenes now because if people are doing videos on this, I don't know. I definitely haven't seen them. So maybe this is old news. Maybe people already know about this. But if you don't, then it'll be a nice surprise for you. And you can go check this out yourself because this is just in the movie. And it's a really fun thing to see, at least in my opinion. The first scene that I want to talk about, and it's very, very quick. And if you didn't bother to go frame by frame, like most people, you would have never noticed it. But I think subconsciously your body sees these images and your brain translates them very quickly. So even if you don't recognize what you're seeing, it gets in there somehow. Once you slow it down to a frame by frame sort of situation, you can see what they're doing and how it would start to make you feel uneasy, even though if you watch the movie at full speed, you wouldn't notice this. The scene that I'm talking about here is when Katie comes back up to the bedroom because the video is playing and she can hear it, and she opens the door and there is this quick zoom into her face and then a cut. It is not very long. It is like blink and you'll miss it long. But that's where the uneasy feeling starts. And the reason is because of the frame by frame. If I slow it down a lot, you can see her face starting to morph into this weird, kind of melted, disfigured look. And as I said, I think the brain processes this somehow, but not enough for you to notice what you saw, just to know that something was off. Considering that this scene happens within, I think, the first 10 minutes of the movie, it's done in a very good way to set the tone to make you feel a bit paranoid or uneasy before we get to the next scene that I want to talk about. This next scene is the one that definitely gave me a panic attack. Like, my heart was racing, I was sweaty, I couldn't breathe, I freaked out. I mean, I didn't do anything noticeable because I was in the theater, but I remember just like going into a dead panic. And that specific scene is when Rachel is talking to her sister in the kitchen, and her sister wants Rachel to investigate Katie's death. And there's a pause.
Rachel, please. I saw her face.
And it cuts to a closet door opening, and you see Katie sitting in there, and her face is all disfigured, kind of melted, looks a bit waterlogged, like she's been in a well for 7 days. And they only show it for a few seconds. That's it. That's yet another thing that I think helps, is that they don't linger on this imagery. They don't give you time to process everything that you've seen. So, yes, it kind of defeats the purpose to go back and look at it frame by frame or study the actual image. But at the same time, when you do that, the way that the movie was made, it's just very well done. Because if you didn't know this, and I didn't know this until years after the fact, that whole scene, that's a practical effect. Rick Baker did the makeup and he made the prop for that Katie doll. That's another reason why I think it's so effective, is it's not CGI, it's makeup. That is something that will always look more realistic than a computer generated image. Moving on to the final scene that I want to discuss, it's when Rachel is at the Morgan house and she sneaks back in and she's watching the videotape of Samara when she's in the institution. Now, once again, this is a scene that is not lingered on very long, and these two parts get overlooked quite a bit. You will get these two clips of Samara in her room, and the point of showing it was that she never sleeps, which is why it's sped up and in fast motion, because you're supposed to get the idea that she was just kind of awake the whole time in there. These maybe last 5 to 10 seconds, if that. You really wouldn't notice anything off about it when you watch it at normal speed, but slowing it down, you catch some weird glimpses of some weird things that Samara is doing. This is another thing, just like at the beginning with kind of the face melting, that I think plays on the whole concept of subconsciously you notice something's not right. Like, you already know that it's not right that this girl is not sleeping for hours on end, days on end, but you're not like fully processing what you're seeing because they have sped it up. Within that is hidden some weird things that maybe you subconsciously pick up on, but you wouldn't notice that. You would just kind of feel weird about it. Thanks to the magic of technology and everything else, you can slow it down frame by frame and you can catch things that are just a little bit off. I'm not saying that any of this is super scary or terrifying. It's just stuff that you wouldn't have noticed at normal speed. The only other Easter egg that I can think of off the top of my head is there is kind of a bacteria looking virus thing at the corner of the screen in one of the shots when Rachel is waking up from her nightmare. And that I think only lasts for 1 or 2 frames. Now, I don't know if this was supposed to mean anything specifically, but the going theory at the time, when I was on the Ring forums back in 2002, was that it was supposed to signify that at that point Rachel was fully infected with the virus that would kill her, the Ring virus, the one that you will die from if you don't pass on the tape. I think it's an interesting theory, and as of this moment, I don't know if it's been expanded upon further, but I like the idea anyway. So, when I talk about horror movies going ahead, I will be very nitpicky, almost like this, because this movie kind of sets the bar for me on what creepy is, what scary is. And everything kind of ranks below that for now, unless sometime in the future I happen to see a movie that I consider to be scarier than this one or just as scary or as effective. One of the biggest things that I want to point out here is that practical effects were always favored over CGI. The characters always behaved in character. And one of the best things about this, one of the most brilliant things about this, is the ending. Now, if somehow you're watching this and you've never seen this movie, I'm about to drop a massive spoiler, but the ending isn't a happy one. They believe that finding Samara's body in the well after she'd been murdered, because they figure that her spirit is tormented and can't rest because her body has not properly been put in a grave or buried. Well, it turns out that that was never the point of the story in the first place. And the point was that Samara made this videotape because she wanted to be heard. She wanted her story out there. She wanted people to know about her suffering. I like that it's a downer ending. I like how they totally swept the rug out from under everyone, and that was not the conclusion. The conclusion was that nobody was safe. Well, nobody who had watched the tape and didn't make a copy. And then we cut to Noah in his loft apartment, and it's day 7, and Samara is coming after him. This is one of the best horror movies out there. I think it still holds up today. I think people could still watch it today and find it very scary. I think that the minimal use of technology within the movie makes it harder to date, so it makes it feel kind of less old. And since analog horror is like a huge thing now, and this deals with a videotape, people would really like it. If you have managed to miss this movie somehow, I would highly recommend it, obviously. But these are all the contributing factors to me in why I like a horror movie. And going forward, when I do my reviews, I will be thinking about this and I will be comparing it to what I think is the best of the best. Not beat for beat or word for word, but you get my idea. Once you have something in your mind of what you think is the best, that's what you compare everything else to. Hopefully, you liked what you saw here today. Maybe you learned something that you didn't know before. Maybe you never saw anything about this. I don't know if anybody's ever covered it before. It doesn't seem like a hot topic on YouTube. I don't know why, because The Ring is one of the most iconic horror movies that I can think of. But even if it has been talked about before, I just wanted to add in my 2 cents. Thank you for watching. I hope you appreciated my analysis of this. And as I said in my previous video, and will probably always say in my videos, leave a comment on what movie you would like me to review or what movie suggestions you have, and I will review those. And remember to leave a like if you like this, so thumbs up, and subscribe if you got this far in the video, because that clearly means you're entertained. Hopefully, I will see you here next time.